on this stretch of Route One for, well, since I've been first elected in some way, shape or form, hoping to get something going. This is, we have a group of people and we have a consultant that is, not only helping us design a plan, but hopefully to implement a plan. And we have some implementation tools in the toolbox that we're very likely to use after this. You don't want to hear me talk, but I do want to thank the committee, Jennifer Donahue, Chris Costa, Bruce Carlson, Matt Pugliese. Who else? You. Anybody else? Me. And a lot of hard work, a lot of time, probably more time than I've spent on it. Just thank this crew a lot. And I'm going to turn it right over to the presenter. It's 5:59. Dan, why don't you start? Because I want everybody to hear everything you have to say. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Nice to see everybody, at least virtually this evening. I think you probably had a chance to meet all, if not most of you, on our trip out previously. When we met last, we talked a little bit about, what are the opportunities, challenges, to help get grounded when we were kind of in the midst of some of the market analysis research. We're at a point this evening, in this process where we're shifting gears a little bit, where, we are really kind of at the end of the analysis research phase. And we're starting to really dig into those questions around, what is it, what are those key things that the town can do to start to move the needle here on Boston Post Road East. And so let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm joined by my colleague, Jim Demesis from Camoin Associates as well. So if you can just bear with me while I get this pulled up. With any luck, that's up there on the big screen. Our agenda this evening, we do want to share where things ended up with all of that market analysis research. So what are those key findings and what does it mean going forward as we start to think about strategies? We'll share a little bit about these vision and goal statements. So what is it that we're really trying to achieve through this initiative? And then really the purpose and bulk of what we want to cover tonight is around, those strategies. What are some of those specific things that, the town can be doing on the implementation front? So we are at a point in the process, and I'll get there in a little bit. But, we're just starting to think about strategies. And so really this is kind of a first step workshop, and after this evening we'll be taking all of your thoughts and input and start to flesh out that strategy in much more detail. And so the next thing that you'll see will be a pretty pretty detailed draft of, what are those kind of key implementation actions for the revitalization initiative. But a quick refresher, I'm sure it's not needed, but in case it is, this is our study area, the Tax Increment Financing District, Boston Post Road East. Again, a little bit of a refresher. I know Carl touched on this. Really this is, it's not just another plan, but it's the implementation of a lot of ideas that have been floating out there, new ideas that will be coming out of this process, as well as some of those first steps that Camoin will be assisting with after all of these kind of strategies and initiatives have been identified. So I know I'm going pretty quick, but we do have a lot to cover. So I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to weigh in on some of the discussion topics. We are getting towards the tail end, the research and analysis, a lot of information collection, conversations, stakeholder involvement. We've had a lot of conversations with property owners and business owners, including just another round this past week. So there's a lot of work that's been done to date, and we're now kind of, as I said, at the so what part of this effort. So I want to talk a little bit about the target uses and some of those analysis findings. When we talk about target uses, and this is kind of the conclusion of the market analysis, it's those uses that can really start to catalyze revitalization, start to attract additional investment. Um, and it's really, it's not to say that there aren't other uses that will be part of a mix because there will be, and we'll talk a little bit about what those uses are in just a second. But this is the needle that we're trying to thread when we talk about target uses and feasible uses. And so it's not just, here's what the market can support. This is what private developers want to build, will build. That's certainly an important component of it, but it's not the only component. And so, there's a lot of things that we've identified as potential uses, but they all have to be considered really through kind of the filter or prism of community feasibility. And so that's where a lot of the conversations have come into play, conversations with stakeholders. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the public input. So, the target uses are feasible uses with the potential to really start to move the needle here in the district. So, on the community feasibility side, there was a community survey that we had done as part of this, starting with kind of a launch at town meeting. One of the questions we asked, and probably comes as no surprise, but how would you rate the current state of Boston Post Road East, the district? Almost 8 out of 10 are fair or poor. So again, I don't think any surprise, but clearly folks are ready for something to happen here. All right, so it's fair, it's poor, and we asked, what are those biggest challenges and issues that you see facing this area? And so the top two, with number one being distressed properties, followed by walkability. So walkability, everything around safety, sidewalks, all of those kind of concerns kind of gets wrapped into walkability. And I think distressed properties probably speaks for itself. So all of these things kind of help to shape, our strategies. And then, around the specific uses, we asked what people would like to see here. At the top, recreational spaces or parks, restaurants and cafes, marine related development, residential housing had a lot of support. And then kind of rounding out that top group was cultural or entertainment venues. Folks could pick more than one use, but those were the ones that kind of rose to the top when we asked that question. And this is where we ended up with the 6 target uses. Again, this is not to say that these would be the only 6 uses that anybody envisions being allowed or such in the district, but if the town is interested in revitalization, these are the 6 things that we recommend it focus on to, again, really spur revitalization, really start to make a difference. These are the opportunities, and these we believe would have the community feasibility as well and the support to move forward. So let's talk a little bit about each one and some of the things that we found going through this research process. Multifamily housing is broad and intentionally so because there's opportunity and need really across all different income levels and housing types. So there's certainly market potential at the high end for, very, nice market rate apartments. But there's also a significant workforce housing level need. So middle income, folks that are maybe earning, 50,000 or even less, working in the community. So really across the board, there's a lot of housing potential. And I would say, when we did the analysis, in terms of really, what has the greatest market potential in terms of, development potential activity, it's really on the housing side. It's where the market is, it's where the need is. And, a lot of these metrics that you're looking at here certainly back that up with things like really strong rent growth and extremely low vacancy levels. You could pick almost any market metric at this point in the housing market, and it's going to point to the need for more housing. Um, and you combine that with the fact that we're in a district that's got transit-oriented potential, potentially walkable to the train station. There's a lot of good things to be said about the location in terms of housing. So some images just to give a flavor. We're not saying that this is a kind of a prescriptive design or anything like that, but just to give a sense of what that housing could look like. Townhouses certainly has there's a variety of those, and certainly would fare pretty well in the market. So there's a couple different types that you see there. More traditional, you're seeing some three-story garden apartments or two-story on the bottom there. Right, just kind of nice multifamily housing. Mixed use, this is one of the things that's really being produced across the state, across the country. This is really where the market is, where a lot of developers are focused doing this kind of development. And again, a really good fit for the district, an opportunity to have ground floor commercial spaces, restaurants, those types of things with housing above. So related, and definitely some overlap between multifamily and age 55 plus housing. You'll see this called all different things, but essentially it's housing for those in the kind of empty nester category or senior category. And there's a really wide spectrum in terms of what that housing looks like, as folks I'm sure are aware. You get into all different kinds of senior housing, nursing, assisted living, and so on. But when you move down to kind of the 55, age bracket, there's a lot of demand and a growing population in kind of those age brackets for downsizing options, and there's very limited inventory, not just in Old Saybrook, but generally, throughout the region, throughout the state. There's very few options to downsize into, whether it's nice apartments, just smaller kind of patio homes, single-story homes. And so, folks that maybe have a preference for different types of housing often are kind of just staying in their single-family home. And there is some demand out there, and quite a bit of demand. And when you get into the senior housing options, similar story. There's limited availability. So sometimes folks are having to leave the community if they want quality senior housing option. There's wait lists all over the place. So there's a lot of demand going unmet, a lot of need. And again, it's another kind of opportunity to help spur revitalization here in the district. Just some examples. You could look at 30 pages of pictures, but just to give you a sense, right? This could really be, a wide variety of housing that we're talking about. And so we're not necessarily saying that it has to be one or the other, but, this is a strong opportunity. Condos, senior apartments, age restricted, there's all kinds of types of this kind of housing. We also took a look at the lodging market, hotel market metrics. Is that something that could be supported here in the district? And you see some of the market data on the right side. That you see that big dip in 2020 with the pandemic. but a strong rebound. And so you have occupancy rates and rental rates that are essentially at all-time highs. They're at relatively healthy levels. And when you start to also look at the current supply, there is a bit of a gap for kind of nicer quality lodging. And so it is an opportunity. There are some, challenges, with kind of lodging development and, quality of place and the walkability issues, all of those kind of things are related. But, the market could support a new lodging establishment here. And this is kind of the segment that we identified, where that gap is and where we think a new establishment would be pretty successful. So upper mid-scale, like a Holiday Inn Express, or upscale class hotel. So to put that in a little bit of perspective, there's only two categories above that. Then you get into upper upscale and straight to luxury. So it's kind of, two-thirds of the way up the scale, if you will, and a little bit of a nicer product than what you can find right now. The next target use is really a catch-all of a couple uses, but it gets to this kind of market opportunity around this being a destination. And so there's a lot of metrics that kind of point to this, but overall, the town is in a great position. It already acts as a kind of a regional hub for a lot of folks. This is where they do their shopping. This is where they're getting their services. That's where they're going out for dinner and those kind of things. And there's an opportunity to really capitalize on that and grow the town's role in that respect as a destination for dining, entertainment. There's some metrics here you see at the top, quite a few, almost 80,000 um, people within a reasonable drive time. Median income is over 100,000. So, there's a lot of households with, disposable income that, new businesses would be able to take advantage of. So there's a lot of different things that we've looked at that have pointed to that. Again, there are those challenges, building kind of the quality of place and so on. But, there is the potential from the market analysis to bring some of those destination uses into the district. That's another one of those that, the actual physical form can take a lot of different shapes. So, going back to the housing, mixed use, retail and restaurants on the ground floor certainly fits that profile of, kind of those destination uses. The kind of attractive destination brewery is kind of another good classic example, and kind of another specific opportunity, potentially for the district. But certainly not others. These are just kind of some examples. I think the key thing is there's really kind of that role for the district to play as that destination hub. Health and wellness was another use or uses that emerged, and a couple of things that pointed to this as being a strong opportunity for the district. It's businesses in these categories have been performing well. When we look at things like job growth and some other metrics, you see the 33% more concentrated, usually points to it being, a particular strength in the area. So, we have a lot of, industry growth, strong, strong numbers for these sectors. And then we've got, the demographics that we look at. And so with an aging population and things like consumer characteristics, we look at, spending profiles of households in the region, and things like recreation, health, fitness, all of those things stand out. So there's a lot of things that point to health and wellness uses as an opportunity here. And I should say that, there's a lot of synergies too between, potential synergies between these kind of uses. So, health and wellness is very complementary to senior housing, for example, and you will often see, developments will do both. And so there's different models where, that is considered as well. So medical office, kind of one of the classic examples of, what that can look like. If you've been to, a doctor's office in one of these buildings, they all cluster together and it's all medical and health related businesses. Or, things like outpatient facilities, not necessarily in urgent care, but, that's always a good example, other kind of outpatient ambulatory services. Those kind of smaller, more kind of retail oriented healthcare uses. And then on the fitness side, things like fitness centers and indoor sports complexes, right? There's going back to kind of those households in within a reasonable drive time. There's, thousands and thousands of households that kind of fit the profile for these kind of facilities. And, there's certainly some fitness, facilities available locally and regionally, but, there's not everything. And so, it's a potential other opportunity to be thinking about. The maritime uses are also something that we took a look at. There are going to be some challenges with maritime, but it's not it's still an opportunity. So obviously, we're the district that's the gateway to a lot of marinas, over 1,300 slips, at local marinas combined. So there's this substantial recreational boating market that we can take advantage of or better take advantage of. And that also plays into some of those destination uses, the dining, that's, kind of a primary market segment for those as well. But other things that we've looked at, right? Industry performance, boat dealers have been performing very strong. It's kind of a unique local strength and regional strength, potential to build that further potentially. We have a population base that is engaged in motorboating, power boating more than typical places, and it's a kind of a target market group that new businesses in kind of the maritime area would be able to capitalize on. So some examples, and I know there's already some maritime uses here, but additional things like boat dealers, boat repair, potentially even some small scale production, even if it's not, actually producing boats, components or, small components and electronics and those kind of things, often do want to locate in areas like this where they've got the local market, close proximity to the water. And so on. So it is an opportunity, in some respects. There are some, challenges around, for these kind of uses, typically want cheap land and easily developable land and those kind of things. But it is something that, we feel that the town, with the right support, this could make these kind of uses happen here. So again, I know I went through that quick. I promise there's going to be an opportunity for you all to chat in just a little bit here. So those are, like I said, the 6 areas where, if the town were to focus on those 6 types of uses, really is, what we feel would be the best opportunity to spur revitalization, recognizing that, it's not only those 6 uses in the future of Mariners Way here. So let's talk a little bit about what we're calling vision or goal statements. Usually this is kind of how we start, this discussion around strategy and moving into strategy. And, at the end of the day, what does it boil down to that we're trying to accomplish here? So here are some draft goal statements. Apologize for just reading off the slides, but I think they are important. Enhance the appearance and quality of place of the district in alignment with the community character of Old Saybrook. Maintain, support, and integrate successful existing businesses in the district with future revitalization. Infuse new and diverse housing to meet needs and attract new private investment. Add destination appeal to the district, including dining, entertainment, and lodging. Cultivate and attract maritime related businesses. I think, more than the other uses, that cultivate, piece of it is going to be really critical. Focus on meeting community health, fitness, and wellness needs, and including integrating complementary community amenities and recreation with new private development, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but all of that is to say, you can do really interesting kind of mixed use development projects and public-private partnerships where, those kind of sports or health fitness things are kind of integrated with more traditional, residential, commercial housing. So there's a lot of things that can be done on that front. And then improve the district's connectedness or connectivity and walkability while maintaining transportation needs of businesses, kind of noting the fact here that we do have some businesses with truck needs. At the same time, we can't ignore that, the lack of things like sidewalks and very wide corridor here favorable for automobiles. It's a challenge when you're talking about attracting some of these uses, like housing and so on. All right, I'm going to take a break from speaking very soon, I promise. We're going to get into the workshop and some discussion. So what we've got 5 discussion topics. We'll spend roughly around 10 minutes each. Although that's not a hard rule depending on where we are. And really, these are topics related to some initial recommended initiatives. So like I said, we're at the initial stages. We have some ideas in terms of direction for kind of these strategy pieces. But you're not reacting to a full-blown plan tonight. You're helping us shape that plan, letting us know if we're on the right track, and hopefully sharing other ideas, that we should be thinking about and integrating as we move forward here. So, with that being said, let's move on to our first topic here. And one of the, I think, really critical recommendations, that we have at this point, at least as a preliminary recommendation, is to create a dedicated entity. So would be kind of a quasi-public entity whose only mission is focused on revitalization of Mariners Way. And there's a couple examples. There's a couple different forms that can take. The model that we think would work particularly well here and has worked well in other places throughout Connecticut and other variations in other states would be through what's called a redevelopment agency, which is authorized under Connecticut law. You're empowered as the town to create one of these, kind of formally recognized entities. So I think that it's best explained going through some examples of, what the value is and, what that would bring to this kind of revitalization initiative. So Norwalk their redevelopment agency has been around for quite a while, and it's a good example. It's probably on the end of the spectrum that, they've got a lot of staff and they do a ton of projects. And so, these types of redevelopment agencies really exist kind of across the spectrum in terms of staffing and resources and activities. So we'll show you a range. But they've got a board of commissioners. These agencies are not, wholly wholly independent. They're under the authority of a board and so on. So this is focused on urban core. Redevelopment agency is going to be focused only on a specific district. It would make sense to do it with the TIF district. You would not necessarily have to only do it for the TIF district. But some common activities, and this is what the Norwalk agency has been doing. Grant procurement, they're a great vehicle for receiving state grants and other grants. They do a lot of planning work, community engagement, visioning, all of those kind of things. Actively working to attract developers, and then being involved with things like site preparation and assistance with development. Um, I'll give you a couple examples. I think kind of paints a better picture. So this one on the left, it was a public-private partnership, and the agency brought 3 million plus. I think they matched it with another million of local funds, and they put in a lot of the infrastructure that was needed to make this project happen. And so that was kind of the public portion of that public-private partnership. And then the private developer did this mixed use project as a result. But there are some really interesting things that redevelopment agencies can do, and that would have a lot of relevance for Mariners Way. So if you look on the right, this is another effort that they've been involved with, and like I said, it's a good vehicle for receiving grants. And so a lot of these agencies are involved with brownfield remediation. So they might purchase brownfield property, and will receive cleanup grants and do the cleanup, and then issue RFPs for to solicit developers to come in and redevelop property after they've cleaned it up. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what these kind of agencies can do. They're also a great way for assembling development sites. So that's one of the things with the district is there are a lot of privately owned properties. There's not a great shovel-ready development site. And for willing property owners that are interested in selling their properties, this is a great avenue for them to do so. And the result is the agency is able to purchase properties and kind of do that land assembly process, which a lot of developers shy away from because that's risk and it's money and it's time, and developers don't like any of those. So it's a way to shift that burden, take that burden on, and start to get some sites that are a little bit more marketable, starts to move things forward kind of before a private developer is even in the picture. East Haddam is another redevelopment agency, fairly recently established, and they were really just established for one single project to focus on this redevelopment of a former town office and garage property. And they've been really focused on TIF district, but they've done community engagement and have done requests for developer solicitations. And compared to Norwalk, which they've got several staff members at least, East Haddam is an all volunteer appointed board, and they get a little bit of staff support, existing community staff, but they don't hire staff. And so there's a full kind of range of capacity and resources involved with these kind of agencies. So there's different models, there's flexibility to structure these kind of things in different ways. And then just quickly, the last one I wanted to share before we get your thoughts this was another one in Manchester, and they've been involved in bonding, which is another power that these kind of agencies can have. But again, it's kind of subject to the approval of the town board, municipal board. So they're not rogue entities out there issuing bonds on their own, but it's it kind of becomes the structure for doing those kind of things, for acquiring property, implementing infrastructure projects, and so on. So let me pause there and see if there's any reactions. Does that sound like we might be on the right track? Any questions, other thoughts? And I can't see faces, so if
Yeah.
Carl, maybe you can call
Any,
in folks.
so if you're online and you want to raise your hand, raise your hand. You know how to do that. We've been on Zoom a lot. But anybody in the room have a thought? Liz and Mark?
I didn't see he addressed the question that I raised at the initial meeting, and I did my homework. The United States Department of Transportation in 1956 built the interstate highway system in order for military planes to be able to land and evacuate people in time of national emergency. For that reason, they didn't allow any buildings to go up higher than 1 story because airplane wings are wider than the highway. And I haven't seen that these gentlemen have addressed whether they went to the DOT, the federal DOT, to see whether they could even do anything along the highway. If you drive the interstates, and I have, outside of the major metropolitan areas, it's long, straight, level, and boring because they don't allow building at least 300-400 feet either side of the interstate. Just drive I-95 down to Florida. Once you get south of Washington, D.C., it's a boring, straight, level drive. No buildings near the highway. Even in New Haven, the buildings along the harbor are set way back from I-95 on the far side of the service road.
Okay. Appreciate the comment. Somewhat unrelated to the first point. So what
Well,
Liz?
you can't
Well,
even get to the building if you don't know if you're allowed to.
We're not gonna stop the conversation dead in its tracks over something that maybe not be fully researched right now. So let's talk about an entity, Mark.
My only point was, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Everybody knows we're short housing. I would think that would be the direction we should focus on, whether it's 55 or a mixture of 55. But as far as lodging or anything like that, we have medical buildings all over the place. We're gonna focus on something, wanna do it right. We're short housing.
Yeah.
That would be it was just a comment.
Yeah.
I think an entity is needed if we want to focus on that and actually get something done.
Yeah.
We haven't done that in the past, and I think that's why it languishes, because there is no one focused on marketing that one specific area and looking at possibly buying the 2 derelict sites,
Yeah. And,
cleaning them up and then sending them out for
yeah,
redevelopment.
and something we're trying not to do is to focus on a site.
I know, I understand. No, I get it.
I know you do. So thank you for that. And there, yeah, so online.
Megan?
Hi, thank you. I just want to echo that, yes, I think this is an excellent idea to have an entity that focuses on the area because, as we know, a plan is just a plan. Typically, it sits on a shelf. Having a body that's dedicated to moving the action items in the plan forward, I think would be imperative to getting anything in the plan done and getting it off the shelf and into action. I also think I like the idea of focusing on grant writing and funding as a task for the entity, because that is also a full-time job. And, all of our towns in the region struggle to corral resources into one area or another. There are so many grants out there. There are so many priorities. So having an entity focused just on this area to look at grants specifically for items that are prioritized in the plan would, I think, be really helpful.
And Megan also is employed by the local council of governments. And there's a whole plan going on with the local council, the Thrive grant that might kind of be mixing a little bit with this. So, but we can talk about that maybe later or at another time. Further, Mr.
The makeup of the public or quasi-public entity should be dominated by local Old Saybrook people. And my recommendation would be that it not have a majority of those who are in the overall real estate business, that the locals would have influence over it. And critically, that it not be capable of taking property by eminent domain.
So why do you, that's an interesting comment. Why would you want to rule that out?
Rule what out?
Eminent domain?
Eminent domain?
I mean, it's,
Because NLDC is a great
No,
example
I'm not.
of a total flop.
yeah, and I'm not saying that it's, it can always be a tool in the toolbox, especially if there was going to be public land there for a public purpose. And that is, recreation or, anything like that is a public purpose that eminent domain is a tool for. So by the way,
It didn't make the slides,
I'm not tipping my hand here. No, it didn't. We talked about it, okay? Full disclosure. But, that is not that is a very difficult topic, obviously. Not only for any entity, but for the in the political scene too. So, but I don't think I would give an absolute no to anything, but we can talk about that. The entity is not formed, but thank you for your comment and you're appointed.
And my
Paul.
comment would kind of, work off of, his comment. I don't want an entity of professional developers so that you get this homogenized concrete, sort of, again, looks like Norwalk and looks like every other
Yeah.
urban development in the country. I think we would lose what is valuable to Old Saybrook, which is perhaps to have something more heterogeneous and maybe not all the pieces fit right or whatever, what local character as opposed to this grand concrete
Thank you for that. Thank you.
site.
All right, Dan, do you have any feedback on that, or Dan or Jim? Or did you want to move on unless there were further comments?
No, I think so I mean, with respect to composition, I think, that those concerns make a lot of sense. And I know from, the redevelopment agencies that we've seen, and maybe Jim can offer any thoughts here too, but that having that rounded membership is pretty important. It's important to have the balance of, typically, because it's an all volunteer, you want to make sure you have, folks that can bring certain expertise, whether that's legal expertise, real estate expertise. But, I think it is important to have the balance as was suggested. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about kind of, how, existing stakeholders, property owners, business owners in the district might be involved in the future. So we are going to get to that as a topic. But Jim, anything else that you wanted to offer on the kind of this idea of a redevelopment agency or entity?
And just real quickly, just to add a couple of other nuances, because I just want to really stress there's no one right or wrong, and there could be variations too. So, and I'm currently working with the East Haddam one, and I just want to let you know, they're on one end of the spectrum, which is very much controlled by the voters of the town and the citizens. In other words, and I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying that's one end of the spectrum. In fact, anything they do must therefore go out to vote of the town. Um, and and they did ban eminent domain, although it is causing some concern. Not that they just want to take entire properties, but they kind of need to take pieces of properties to expand the public areas, if you will, and the right of ways and things like that. And then in terms of the makeup of the committees, it is very important that they be driven by the local volunteers. You can have professionals on them, but you have to have really clear rules on when to recuse yourself from votes or when you should be transparent about your role in terms of specific projects. So I can add that in, but just saying that that's one end of the spectrum.
Thank you. Dan, do you want to move on and touch on the next topic?
Yeah, we'll move on to the second one here. And so there's kind of two pieces here, but this topic, really gets to, what are the resources that one, we can offer existing property owners, business owners for expanding their business, improving their property, improving, not just the aesthetic appeal of it, but turn it into more marketable space and therefore helps attract more quality tenants, businesses, and those kind of things. And then what are the things that can be done to help attract and spur the type of development that we really want to see here? What are the incentives that are needed? What are the options? So there's kind of two pieces to this. And there's certainly opportunities, that are emerging. So, one, we're already in a TIF district, tax increment financing, hasn't generated a ton of money into any kind of a fund yet. But as projects get underway, that fund will become more populated. There's more funds to do things like infrastructure and other types of things. Town's TIF policy already allows for, offering incentives to developers. So there's another, that hasn't been widely used. So there's opportunity to, kind of make better use of what's already allowed in that sense. Another kind of timely development at the state level is with MRDA, the Municipal Redevelopment Authority. Now, after a couple of years of being unfunded, suddenly looks to have some funds in hand and launching. And if you haven't been tracking that, it's kind of being addressed in this next legislative session, but essentially looks to allow local communities like Old Saybrook establish what would be called a housing growth zone. It's really intended to focus on kind of that transit-oriented housing development, but this is an area this district would be eligible, seemingly for that designation, and potentially there's some state money that could come down the line from that, potentially in the near future. And it's also a district that has a new dispensary, and in addition to a lot of strong feelings, also generates some notable revenues for the town, and there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of how the town can use those funds. But it's another potential funding resource that could come into play here. So these are all kind of things that we're thinking through, but generally kind of thinking about these two categories: resources to existing businesses and property owners, and then for those coming in to help attract new development. So any thoughts here?
And this is Jim. I'll just add one other quick thing. I just want to point out, and you already mentioned it, but you do, and again, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of it. You have a strong TIF policy in terms of a plan, and that's a real benefit because it's a good way of packaging all the financing options. In other words, it's not one distinct thing. It allows a lot of financing to occur within that. And then secondly, not only does it help with potentially incentivizing some developers or businesses, but it also becomes a way to generate funds for your public improvements as well. So you have a very good one in place, and that's that puts you ahead of many places. That's all I just wanted to point out.
Thanks, Jim.
The et cetera at the end there, would road improvements, local road improvements be eligible to be on that list? Rome Tree and what is it, Mill Rock Road East by Northeast Medical that lead to the back there. The roads are not suitable for carrying vehicles and customers to new stuff, if there is to be new stuff.
So the answer to that is yes. I mean, road improvements would be, I think, road improvements and road aesthetics, I think would be a very critical part of redevelopment here. Several years ago, the town toyed with a bit of the boulevard feel here. Maybe, in fact, I did email DOT recently because our committee is talking about getting DOT in the room to say, hey, look, we have this, we want to have a redevelopment zone, we're going for money, what do you guys think about, what is acceptable to you in terms of road improvements, a road diet, median in the middle, where are the sidewalks gonna go? So
A lower speed limit.
lower speed, whatever it is. I mean, a road diet might help with that. So I emailed them about 2 days ago. I have not heard back yet. But sometimes it takes time for them to find the right people to get in the room. So absolutely, yes. I think that's a really critical part of any redevelopment. And it could be one of the first things you do, in fact, so.
Going along and improving the infrastructure, whether it be water, electricity, everything would be the place to start. Like with the roads.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any particular problems with water or electricity. There may be, as we know in the town, a problem with wastewater.
I didn't want to bring that.
Yes, well, I brought it up.
Okay, so Karen's there to take over for Joanne.
Oh, okay. I don't know, where's the zoning meeting?
Upstairs.
Upstairs.
So we're gonna stay till 7 and then.
Yeah,
So we're.
Okay.
I was just gonna follow up on the wastewater point. I don't know if we still have Megan, but if folks aren't aware of the town's Thrive grant and initiative that's kind of going to be overlapping with this, starting up now essentially. One of the things that process will be doing will be looking into questions of wastewater system feasibility, whether just something, a Mariner's Way system, if there's kind of the engineering, design, technology potential. I certainly am no engineer, so can't speak to it, but there is going to be that potential opportunity to answer that question of what a kind of a district-wide system could potentially look like. I know that kind of scope of work might not be totally finalized. But Megan, I don't know if others want to speak to that a little bit.
I think you summed that up very nicely. I also am not an engineer and can't speak to the technical aspects of what that's going to look like. But that is something that will be moving forward in Old Saybrook, as well as less relevant for this conversation, but Westbrook and Clinton as well.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, it's an important unanswered question, I think, at this point. I think there's two very different futures for this district and in terms of what it looks like and development capacity related to wastewater. There's a lot of market potential, development potential, should there be wastewater. And, I think that results in a very different looking corridor than, if there's not, and, it's on site, it's septic and so on.
They do amazing things with large on-site septic systems. Maybe not preferable. But any other comments before we move on? I think we're good.
All right, let's move on. Touched on this briefly, but one of the really critical things, in advancing, all of these kind of strategies and actions that we're talking about is, how do we do that in collaboration with existing businesses and property owners, right? As we said, this is a district that's essentially fully privately owned. And so, we have a lot of existing businesses, property owners that have invested in the district, are established, and what is kind of that mechanism for them to be involved with these ongoing conversations so that revitalization is a partnership and not confrontational. So what does that look like? So essentially, the kind of the high level implementation action here would be to create a formal organization of those stakeholders within the district. And something where they'd have the ability to interact with the town, to provide feedback on various types of initiatives, where the town can brief them on kind of ongoing actions. And if we go back to the redevelopment agency, they can be a kind of an advisory, offer advisory kind of things to that entity. So there's a lot of different shapes and forms, again, that this could take, but I think the important thing is, there's a structure and a system for that ongoing communication and collaboration. And I know, Carl, we've talked about this a little bit too. I don't know if there's anything that you also wanted to add to this one.
Not in particular to this. I mean, obviously, if you have a business or own property in the area, you should have a voice. And whether it's a Main Street Business Association type of that used to exist here in town, or a different structure, they have a stake. Getting back to the point before, Dan, you don't have to go back. The Municipal Redevelopment Agency, which was brought to our attention as a group. Matt Pugliese is now Assistant Deputy, geez, I want to get that title right.
Yeah.
What? Deputy Commissioner at DECD. Bruce saw the legislation. I was at a meeting and I saw one of the speakers, I think Speaker Ritter mentioned it. This Municipal Redevelopment Agency has $60 million worth of bonding authority. And they were very clear, come and get it. That's what they said, basically. So there's money out there, and the cannabis retailer out there, we estimate the town will be receiving between $100,000 and $150,000 a year. Obviously, some of that should go towards prevention, but it's allowed to be used for area improvements. And it's a broad term. So there's going to be money, and that money started, I mean, forget the TIF money, which is about 100,000 at this point. That's 20, that comes in smaller increments. But if property prices start increasing out there, that's going to come in at a faster rate. You're going to have steady income from the cannabis retailer, and if we can access some of this MRDA money, we don't have to like it or not like it with the cannabis, but it's a fact, and it's going to help us improve this area. And if nothing else, it's some seed money. So anyway, I think topic 3 is very straightforward.
Any questions or comments, or if not, that's fine. We can move on to the next one.
Hey, Megan?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, were you thinking that the district stakeholders might be dovetailed with the redevelopment agency? Could that be formulated as some sort of ongoing partnership or like a subcommittee or just some sort of regular engagement and cross pollination between those two entities?
Yes, how about that?
All right.
Dan, do you have any expert advice on that, Dan or Jim?
I think the formal part of that will be something that the town's just gonna have to see what ends up being the best fit. I think conceptually the relationship between this redevelopment agency and that group is important to be keeping in mind and to making sure that there is a working relationship of some sort. So the exact structure of that, I don't know that I have any particular thoughts at the moment. But Jim, I don't know if you want to offer any.
Yeah, that's I'll just hit on that. I think the key is like making sure you don't overdo it with too many committees. But if I heard you right, Megan, you're like, hey, how do we coordinate some of this for like the same kind of information and engagement? So, like for instance, when you have your TIF district, right? You might have therefore the agency if you go that model. Well, in all of those cases, you should be reporting on engaging every single year in terms of the performance and well-being of the district. So that's where you can therefore build in a process that sort of hits on multiple purposes essentially, rather than having all these different things going on.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking. I wanted the efforts to align as opposed to having everyone running in different directions.
Want to row the same way, right?
Right, exactly.
Thank you, Megan.
Any others?
I think you're good.
Okay. We actually touched on this a little bit, the conversation around the streetscape. So, not just Route 1, but, we've got some other, streets, collector streets in there to be considered as well. But, there's no avoiding the conversation of, the walkability issues, the traffic, and the connection to downtown train station. All of those issues are really a challenge to revitalization, attracting some of those, target uses that we talked about. And so, as part of what we're doing, which is not engineering and it's not design, it's still, we need to, chart a course for how we go from this, auto and truck oriented roadway to something that's a little bit more friendly for pedestrians. If you're going to live here and walk to the train station, right, you just can't do that now in any kind of a safe way. So, those are some of the things that we're thinking through. What is that? How do we get from A to Z here when it comes to this kind of roadway? And this is from Clinton, just as kind of an example. And Carl mentioned, there's been some design looks at this corridor in the past, and so it's not starting from scratch, but there's a need to address this if we're talking about revitalization. The River Cog and Thrive is an avenue and vehicle for exploring that a little bit through that initiative. As Carl mentioned, we're also planning to speak with the Connecticut DOT. But let me stop there and see, what folks have to say about this one.
I think you're thinking about it the right way. I think my first concern was just that sort of multimodal connection to the train station and downtown. And if we don't include that in the plan, building sidewalks right on Marin Way to help anybody. It's got to be part of a connected network for the whole town. So I appreciate you bringing that up right away.
Any zoning commissioners who want to talk before you have to leave?
Any comments?
Any final comments? Because I know you have a meeting you have to run to. Some have already run.
Walking to the train station sounds great until you get to the railroad bridge. If you can cross the 5-lane wide Strode at Mystic Market and get to the sidewalk on the western side of the railroad bridge. It's only 5 feet wide. Did they clear the snow from it recently? No, so there's a lot of stuff that has to happen before you can talk about walking to the train station year round.
It's difficult. I mean, forget the snow. It's difficult other than the snow. And there's a lot of curb cuts.
Yeah.
All along Route 1 there. I did look the other day, the wires are mostly on one side, I think the north side, I want to say. So in theory, you'd be able to have taller street trees, on the south side.
Get the wires buried, you can have real tall trees.
Well, this is true.
Is natural gas down?
That'll take up all that $60 million.
Is natural gas down there?
No, I actually don't know. I'm assuming so, but I don't know.
Okay. Because I think that would be important. So.
Yeah,
What was the last question?
natural gas.
Oh, natural
gas.
I'm assuming so. So we're losing a few more people now, but I think you've gotten through a lot of your presentation, which is great.
Wonderful. Yeah, if there's no, if it sounds like folks are,
I was, maybe it's premature, but think about not having the sidewalk right along Route 1, because of course, I think Route 1 is still gonna be Route 1, but have it on a space, maybe with some trees or whatever.
And then the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Further up property.
Yeah, it's a very large right of way, so that is a strong possibility.
That would be a substitute for the boulevard option, so.
Any other thoughts as we move to topic 5? Dan, Jim, Megan? So by the way, I just want to say that the town is very fortunate. We have Megan Jelflis, who works at the COG, and is also sitting as are you an alternate, Megan, on planning?
Yeah. I'll take
Yes, lives in
Yeah.
town. Very fortunate to have Megan. I've seen her work over the last few years, both at the COG and locally, and a huge resource. And of course, not that, I mean, it's nice to have the deputy commissioner on the board of selectmen too. Not that means anything. Matt would have to be obviously super careful, but it's good for informational purposes at the very least. We're very fortunate in that. And Dan, Jim, anything else, or anybody in the room? I didn't mean to rush it, but I wanted to get as much in front of the zoning folks as we could, and I think we did.
yeah, no, I think that was fine, Carl. I'm not sure how many folks we still have, but as everyone can see, this is just if you have any outstanding ideas, questions, anything at this point, we're happy to chat.
One more thing, Nick?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I know it's just been recently announced, but the redevelopment of the Westbrook outlet and how that might affect this, especially since they're looking at over 500 housing units.
Yeah, well, I can address that a little bit. So when you have situations like this, right, where you've got a mega planned project, there's a couple considerations. One, it raises the question, is that going to completely saturate the market, suck up all the demand, leave no potential? At this point, I don't think that's the case. With such a long timeline, and what we've seen in terms of regional housing demand, certainly, it's going to be a factor, but I'm not expecting that suddenly means that, there's no housing development potential in the district. One of the other things that happens too is, with a big proposed project, and of course remains to be seen, right, how much of that gets built. But it's gonna attract new attention to this area. So potentially you've got new investors, developers that are, taking note of this, seeing that someone else is responding to a market opportunity, looking for additional opportunities. So potentially there's, some positive aspects with that kind of bringing some more attention to this area, potential investment.
And one other thing I would note is, I would like to think that the housing that we might promote and the housing that gets built is TOD housing.
And that's where I wanted to
And
go with it,
there's
yes.
a little bit of a distinction there, so even though it's a great point how difficult it is to walk in the area now, that's not our vision. Our vision is different.
Right.
And folks that would live closer to the railroad bridge on Mariners Way would have the opportunity to not only take all kinds of transit, but walk downtown. And so it'd be a highly walkable area, I would think, and access to both transportation, dining, shopping, gives it a little bit of a distinction over what Westbrook is proposing.
And from what I've heard of Westbrook, they're not proposing any workforce type housing. They're looking more towards higher end.
They are, you wonder if they'll impose something.
They're gonna have to, I mean, that's a given, but I think we need to focus more on that workforce housing. We have too many apartment complexes and too much rental that's way too high. I mean,
Yeah,
I deal with it all day long, being an agent, and it's just, I can't find stuff for people.
so, yeah, I mean, and that's difficult, right? I mean, so does that mean, it still is gonna take developers to come in and put their money on the line, and are they gonna put their money on the line if your housing restrictions are too much?
Right, too much, but I think that's also where grants come in and the state plays a role.
Right, and we've also had good luck with developers coming in and saying, yeah, happy to do it.
Right.
So,
If I could jump in real quick with Westbrook and Old Saybrook, both being part of the Thrive program. And what we're kind of doing with Thrive is we're looking at the transit station as well as sort of nodes around town in Clinton, Westbrook, Old Saybrook, and how to make those connections between the train station and the destination. So one of the things that we will absolutely be looking at as part of that project, and probably in this same group, is how to make those connections via multimodal transit. So walking, biking, possibly shuttle, whatever works best. The same thing's going to be done in Clinton, in Westbrook. But the benefit of looking at it regionally in that big project is that we want to make sure that each town has a distinct kind of identity with their developments and what's being proposed so that it all relates together. You could spend time in Westbrook, you could spend time in Clinton, you could spend time in Old Saybrook, and they're all kind of cohesive and unique.
thank you. One disadvantage is that bridge is an Amtrak bridge.
Yeah.
And you can't touch anything that Amtrak does or that Amtrak goes near. So unfortunately, we will have to work with that bridge as is. Even widening the sidewalk, I bet would be a 10-year wait time to get approval on, and it may not even be allowed. So Amtrak is very difficult that way. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage, but something, we're not there yet. So when we get there, we'll cross that bridge.
Just makes the solution that more unique.
What's that?
Just makes the solution that more unique.
Yeah, Michael?
Just they're replacing the bridge over the Connecticut River, like how far back does that project go? Does it get anywhere near this area?
No. No.
But I just want another topic. You mentioned like, I think parks and recreation. We talked about recreation, health and wellness and like gyms, but I didn't hear a lot talk about parks. Like, is that gonna be included in this plan? Like, where would be a good place to put one, or just kind of baked into like this general green space?
Not there yet. It's all private property.
Yeah.
None of it is town property. So unless there's a private developer who wants to come in and put in, tennis courts, pickleball courts, and padel courts. Have you heard about that? It's a different game. It's another one. It's gonna take over the country. But, unless there was a private recreational developer that came in. Right now, the land is privately owned.
Carl, I think one of the key things on this whole project area is that it needs some cohesiveness to pull together. There's no real community services or family services or even convenience services in that area. It's kind of isolated. There's one, I think, gas station there that has a convenience store in it, but outside of that, there's nothing that can draw and can work that pedestrian type of thing. The more of that stuff you have, the more people will consider walking further and approaching the train station and Main Street and so forth, because it's already there. And some of those recreational things key into that too.
Yeah.
It's got to be looked at in all those little pieces in order, I think, to be successful.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Bruce, anything?
How's that?
Anything else from anybody online? Thank you for attending.
There's the attendees.
Hold on, one second. Yeah, who's running the meeting right now? Oh, Megan. Megan Brady.
Okay. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to, I was just holding some of my comments. I just wanted to say this is a great conversation, and I just wanted to emphasize the support I've heard around town, and I have personally for the housing part of this, senior housing, workforce housing, and for the recreation pieces. But also when we talk about the redevelopment agency, I think I loved everyone's comments on that portion. The only thing I would add to that would be making sure we have a lot of differences in ages and experiences on that agency. So we hear from young families, people with workforce housing needs, and people in our aging community.
Yeah,
That's all.
thank you.
Thanks.
Great point. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Paula?
Has there been a meeting with property owners in that area, or what is the status of town communication with them?
Jennifer, you want to address that?
Yeah,
What's going on?
we've had two group meetings with all the building and property owners there, one of which was last week, where they received pretty much this same presentation and were allowed to give their feedback so that we could help incorporate that into the next steps. And a lot of them were also part of our stakeholder interview process, where we got their own personal views on, you know, what it was like to have a business there and what they would like to see happen. So we have been including them.
So did you get any consistent themes out of those meetings, or any directions that were prominent? Or are they just listening pretty much?
Do you want to address that, Dan? Because we weren't part of the interview process, but
Yeah, I'm happy to. I don't think there was anything that would probably come as a huge surprise. I think probably the biggest theme was around the conversation with traffic, safety, walkability, the connectivity. I think that seems to be one of the priority, if not the priority issue. You know, I probably shouldn't make a blanket statement like that, but that was definitely one of the major themes that we heard through those conversations. So they provided a lot of thoughts about, sidewalks and, improving traffic congestion and those kind of things. So I think that was definitely one of the focus areas.
I think there is some frustration on some of their parts too for the areas that haven't been kept up, and how that kind of brings a bad taste about the whole area when some people are trying to spruce up their businesses and others are not.
So obviously they would be open to renovation, restoration, landscape.
I'm sure some will and some won't.
Okay.
I mean,
I
I have no
was
doubt.
wondering what. so
Some of
far.
those businesses have been there for a very long time. And,
I understand.
so I don't wanna make a blanket statement that
Yeah, right.
everybody out there is saying this is a great idea. But on the other hand, I feel like we need to do something. I think we're all there. This whole town is there, and so.
And they like the idea of a stakeholder group.
Yeah.
So that they appreciated that.
Okay. I think we're good, Dan?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Just a quick wrap up here. So some of the next steps, we didn't really get into anything around zoning. So we are planning to meet as a project team with the zoning commission early March, hear their thoughts, get their input around, what ideas they see for potential changes to any zoning regulations. And then, really after tonight, we start fleshing out draft strategies, initiatives, those action items in more detail. And then there will be another opportunity when all of that is in draft form for some additional feedback. But otherwise, I think that's all that we have on our end. Appreciate everyone taking the time this evening.
Megan, your hand is still up. Did you want to say something else or?
Megan Brady.
Yeah, Megan Brady. Maybe
Oh.
now.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. Nope, I'm all set. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Dan and Jim. Jim, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have
for
a
the
great night.
presentation.
Thank you.